Hi everyone, Suzanne here. I hope you're all well and welcome to Sew Custom. Today's video is a little bit of a departure from my normal range of videos. This is the first of three in which I'm making a gift set for a friend of mine for Christmas. And the set consists of a brush and jewellery roll, an eye mask, and the subject of today's video, which is this gorgeous makeup bag. So if you're interested in seeing that, then let's get started. Starting with the pattern, I'm just using some standard parcel paper. I've given myself a straight edge, and on that edge I'm measuring 9 inches. From there, measuring down 7.5 inches on both sides. And then just squaring off at the bottom. And for seam allowance on my top edge, I'm just measuring the tape on my zip and drawing that in. Now to give myself a flat bottom on my bag, I'm going to measure in from the side 1.5 inches and from the bottom up 1.5 inches. Draw myself a little box. Same thing on the other side. So that's the pattern complete, just to add some seam allowance now. And I'm using a 1 centimeter seam allowance along the sides and the bottom. And then when it comes to my corners, I'm using about 0.5 centimeter. And now the last thing to do for this pattern is to label. So I'm going to cut 2 of outer fabric, 2 of lining, 2 of interfacing, and 2 of fleece. And for fabric, I'm using these gorgeous silks. So this fabric is from a kimono I made last year and found that I actually didn't wear it that much. So I decided to put it to some better use in making this little present set for my friend. And this again is the lining fabric from that kimono, as I mentioned, in the silk. So this should make a pretty luxurious little gift. And then for interfacing on this one, I'm using a pretty strong interfacing. It's a press-on type. And then the fleece, again, this is a press-on type, so it has little glue dots on the back. And using these both in combination will give me the structure and substance I'm after for this bag. And you'll see how that works in a second. So the first thing to cut out is my outer fabric. That's that done. My lining. And then for my fleece and interfacing, I've just traced off my original pattern minus the seam allowance. This will just cut down the bulk at the stitch lines. So that's my fleece. And lastly, my interfacing. And now on to construction. So the first thing to do is to add that little bit of interfacing to my outer fabric. So laying it glue side down to the wrong side of my fabric and pressing into place. And now for the fleece. Same thing again here. This time I'm going to press from the outside of the fabric. And before I move on to anything else, I'm going to let that cool completely, giving that glue time enough to set. So now that that's done, it's time to add my zip. So just lining it up with my top edge. My zip is right sides together with my fabric. I'm using my standard zipper foot here. Starting with a back stitch, making sure my edges are lined up the whole way across. And finishing with a back stitch. And now that that's done, I'm ready to add lining. So just laying it over the top, right sides together, sandwiching my zip in between, and ready to stitch. Back stitching to start and to finish. just needs a press. Pressing the outer fabric and lining away from the zip in preparation for top stitching. And I'm top stitching here for two reasons. One, because it'll give just a lovely decorative finish, and two, it'll hold both the outer fabric and lining away from the zipper teeth. So I'm placing my needle about 2 or 3 millimeters away from the edge of that seam, stitching through the outer fabric, the zipper tape and lining, using a little bit of a longer stitch length, back stitching to start and to finish. So that's had a nice press. Happy with that. So now to repeat that whole process for the other side. So that's my zip all in place, both sides of my bag attached. So the next thing to do is to take care of the sides and the bottom of the bag, placing my fabric on both the outer and lining right sides together. So I'm going to leave myself a little gap on the bottom edge of my lining. I'll sew straight across the outer fabric at the bottom and then the side seams of both the lining and outer. Starting with the bottom edge of the outer, stitching here at my 1 centimeter seam allowance, back stitching to start and to finish. And then for the bottom of my lining, sewing for about 1.5 inches or so, leaving myself that little gap I mentioned, sewing again on the other side for about 1.5 inches. And now for the side seams, starting at the bottom corner of my outer, back stitching, sewing the whole way up, and then when I get to the zipper teeth, I'm just going to stitch here over the top using the hand wheel rather than the pedal. This is just going to give me a little bit more control and make sure I can feel if I'm going into any of those teeth. Finishing there at the bottom corner of the lining with the back stitch. And now to do exactly the same on the other side. So I've pressed open my seams on those bottom edges. And here, just trimming away the excess zipper tape. And now that that's done, I'm ready to close up my corners. So just picking up those edges, making sure the side and bottom seam allowances are matched up, I'll do exactly the same on all corners, including the lining, and ready to stitch. Back stitching to start, sewing here at half of my seam allowance, and back stitching to finish. Repeating that same process on the lining. So that's that done. So now I just have a couple more things to do to finish this bag. The first is to pull everything through to the right side. So that's how that looks. And then the last thing to do is just to hand stitch across that little gap I left in the lining earlier. So picking up a little bit of the lining fabric from one seam, a little bit from the other, and repeating the whole way along. And with that, this little makeup bag is complete. So I've got my lining all in place, got that gorgeous top stitching along that edge, my zip in place, and then that lovely flat bottom. Done! And as I mentioned at the start of the video, this is part of a set. So if you tune in next week, you'll see the eye mask, and the week after, the brush and jewellery roll. So I really hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you found it useful. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you've not yet subscribed, please do, and I shall see you guys on Friday. Until then, I hope you have a fabulous week. Bye folks!